Tenax Therapeutics. It is ticker TENX. We have our next presenter here. He's CEO of TENX. It's Chris Giordano. Chris, hello.
Brent, how are you?
I am doing very well. It is a pretty nice fall day in Detroit, Michigan. Where are you?
I'm in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Pretty nice here as well.
Awesome. Well, good to hear. And I will let you have the floor, sir. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Giordano. I'm the CEO of TENX. I'm here with our Chief Medical Officer, Stuart, and for the Q&A, also our CFO, Michael Jebsen. So a quick word about me. I joined TENX in July of this year as part of a transformation that our company is undergoing as of about a year ago, which I will describe in a few minutes. And then I'll overview very quickly the two programs that we've got ongoing that will see phase 3 patient enrollment in the year ahead. And then I will hand over to Stuart to cover those in more detail. At the end of the brief show today, I'll try to map out a few major clinical and regulatory milestones that we'll be hitting, and I think that our investors will be looking for over the next 12 months.
Hey guys, real quick, let me pop in. Stuart, if you don't mind, there's a little bar in the bottom of your presentation. Hit the little hide button. It's over. Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brent. He's an interventional cardiologist, but we all need a little help even with the technical stuff sometimes. So,
that's what I'm here for.
So that was a long time ago when he was doing interventions all the time. But Stuart is our Chief Medical Officer based in Chicago, where he's had faculty positions at Northwestern and University of Chicago Medical Centers for 40 years now. Stuart's a renowned PAH and pulmonary hypertension expert globally, and has supported FDA for over 20 years as an advisor. So Stuart's one of the advisory committee members on anything that comes through FDA, cardio-renal in pulmonary hypertension. So also related to that transformation that brought Stuart in at the start of this year, we have a great new board of directors at TENX, including 5 physicians now, 3 of whom bring legacy from Omthera, Corvidia, Biohaven, Pfizer, Amarin, and Furiex. So a very helpful group of advisors for Stuart, for me, and the rest of the organization. Our scientific advisory board consists of some of the most eminent thought leaders in the field of pulmonary hypertension. And you can see some of our colleagues listed there, brilliant clinical trialists and helpful to us in conducting our upcoming phase 3. So as to the 2 assets that we have under development now, first of all, Imatinib. This is an anti-proliferative agent. It's considered a miracle drug in cancer. It achieved peak sales for Novartis of almost $5 billion in CML and a few other less common cancers. And it demonstrated efficacy in patients with PAH in their IMPRES trial completed years ago. The second asset we have is Levosimendan. Not available in the US today. Levosimendan has been used in patients with hospitalized heart failure in over 60 countries. The administration globally is limited to intravenous administration. We have the rights to develop and market Levosimendan in North America, and we've demonstrated efficacy in a group of patients who've never seen benefit from a therapy before. On our next slide, we'll quickly touch on the commercial prospects. As you can see on the Imatinib side, we're talking about PAH here, over a $5 billion market today. Many people have been following the news or the potential news about Acceleron. Acceleron is forecast to have a $3 billion peak sales, their therapy, which may be added to this list. So the market continues to grow. There's some who estimate a 10% increase in the number of patients with this rare disease annually. On the right side with Levosimendan, you can see just white space, a completely open market opportunity. So as you can see, we're working on therapies that we take into rare or far more common but very serious cardiopulmonary disease, and that we believe will have real groundbreaking impact and major symptoms and disease modification potential in those populations. So with that, Stuart, I'll hand over to you to go into some more detail about the 2 products.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to go over the development of both of these drugs, and it's going to go relatively fast. So I just want to remind you that this slide deck is loaded on our website, and if you want to revisit it after today's talk, you should be able to do that easily. So for those not terribly familiar, pulmonary hypertension has been categorized in 5 different groups backed by the World Health Organization in 1998. So PAH represents group 1. It's an orphan disease, and it is the one that's had the most attention over the past 20 years for drug development. It's a progressive fatal disease with no cure. Even with all the current therapies, 5-year survival is still only around 57%. So therefore, it has a large unmet clinical need. And the problem is there are no disease-modifying treatments available. Very quickly, this is a disease that's been compared to cancer. If you look at this graphic at the upper left, this is a healthy pulmonary artery, showing you the lining of the pulmonary artery and the blood going through. If we move down to the lower right, what happens is that these cells that line the artery grow inward like cancer. And as they grow more and more, the lumen narrows, blood can no longer get through the lungs, and the patients go into heart failure and eventually die. There are already existing 11 pulmonary vasodilator drugs that have been developed for PAH. They are all orphan drugs, and you can see them listed here in categories. The orphan disease market has attracted a lot of industry investment. However, none of these are disease modifying. They improve the symptoms. They seem to have slowed the progression somewhat. Whereas Imatinib, which we're going to talk about in a second, is a disease-modifying treatment. When asked what % of these patients might qualify for Imatinib therapy, the answer is potentially every one of them. Imatinib was developed by Novartis as Gleevec, the first curative treatment for chronic leukemia, considered one of the greatest breakthroughs in cancer research. Because of early studies in animal models demonstrating the potential for disease reversal, Novartis decided to seek approval for Imatinib as a treatment for PAH. Simply, as I've talked to you already, what Imatinib does is it blocks the growth factors that cause the pulmonary arteries to proliferate and narrow. And not only does it block the disease, it causes disease reversal, which is unique now in the whole field of treating pulmonary arterial hypertension. So Novartis went through an entire drug development plan, including phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, and they showed the drug works. And when I say works from the regulatory standpoint. This is a graphic of the phase 3 trial, showing on the right-hand side the change in 6-minute walk distance, which was the primary endpoint, in the patients who received Imatinib compared to those with placebo. The problem that was occurred, however, was a high dropout rate. If you look at the number of patients on the bottom, Imatinib started with 103, it ended up with only 66. And so the frequent dropouts prevented the approval from EMA and FDA requiring a second trial. The excessive dropouts were attributed to nausea and vomiting from gastric irritation from Imatinib, which has been known about the drug anyway in all of the cancer trials. The problem was Novartis didn't mitigate against it the same ways they did previously. And even though the efficacy was established, because the patent for this drug went off in 2016, Novartis withdrew the NDA and also abandoned the patent. But knowing that this drug still has the potential to be a groundbreaking treatment for PAH, we decided to pick this up and develop it more. What we've done is we've developed a delayed release novel formulation with enteric coating to prevent gastric irritation. Although the immediate release drug is dissolved in the stomach, which causes the irritation, our formulation does not dissolve at all in the stomach pH. It dissolves entirely in the small intestine where the drug is absorbed. We have agreement from FDA that we've diminished the risks of dropouts in our clinical trial design. We've also gone back and said, we can do this even better. We can enrich the trial to not only minimize the risks, but increase the likelihood of success. So our unique formulation will prevent dropouts. We have FDA agreement from a small single PK study, which will be started in the month of October. We have enriched the enrollment of identifying only patients who respond to the drug to be enrolled, which has reduced the number of patients that we need to treat to approximately 50. And we would been invited from the FDA to apply for breakthrough therapy designation. So, in summary, this has the potential to be the very first disease-modifying treatment for PAH. We only need one single phase 3 trial for approval. The orphan disease designation provides 7 years of market exclusivity in the United States and 10 years in Europe. Our unique formulation strategy will minimize our side effects, and we are awaiting to hear from the FDA regarding breakthrough therapy designation. Now I'm going to move on to the second drug that we have, which, as you see, is for group 2 pulmonary hypertension. This is pulmonary hypertension from left heart disease. And as Chris mentioned, there is no current treatment at the time. So this is the underlying problem here is heart failure. There's a lot of news about heart failure with drug therapy, and all of the therapies that have been developed and are being talked about are for the systolic heart failure, which is perceived to be the most common. The problem is that diastolic heart failure is equally as common, equally as lethal, and there's not a single treatment that has ever been successful in this group. In fact, a recent white paper from the NIH made the statement that this is the greatest unmet need in cardiovascular medicine today. The problem is that traditionally, all of the treatments for heart failure have focused on the arterial circulation, whereas we now realize the problem with the diastolic heart failure is the venous circulation and what we refer to as volume overload. There's lower extremity edema, swelling of the ankles, swelling of the abdomen, fluid in the lungs. This is what these patients suffer with this form of heart failure. Here's an example of a patient who has elevated central venous pressure. If you see her neck veins markedly distended here, this is fairly common. This has been assumed to be coexist, but not a problem. Actually, we have identified that this is one of the targets. Here are 2 chest x-rays that I'm showing. The one on the right is normal. The one on the left shows edema fluid all throughout the lung. This is from congested lungs. The problem here is elevated pulmonary venous pressure. That is the other target in this type of heart failure. Levosimendan is a unique potassium ATP channel activator and calcium sensitizer. And what we have discovered is that it has strong vasodilatory effects on the venous bed. Specifically, it causes a marked reduction in the central venous pressure and a marked reduction in the pulmonary venous pressure. And as I mentioned, very recent clinical science has now confirmed that reducing the central venous and pulmonary venous pressure are the critical targets for left heart failure. Why are we studying pulmonary hypertension with left heart failure? Well, first of all, it's the most common type of pulmonary hypertension. If you see on the slide on the right, I broke up in a pie chart the different 5 groups of pulmonary hypertension. PAH, the orphan disease, is this very small 3%. Heart failure is 68%. But equally as important is that the regulatory pathway for drug approval is far less stringent than it is for heart failure alone. So what we did is design a phase 2 mechanistic trial to focus on those 2 gut targets that I mentioned and to see if, in fact, levosimendan would be effective. And we made the trial challenging because we knew that those venous pressures not only are elevated at rest, but they are markedly elevated with exercise. And that is really what we were trying to achieve. So we started with an open label phase where all of the patients had a right heart cath at rest and exercise, were hospitalized and received 24 hours of the levosimendan infusion, and came back the next day to see whether the drug worked. In those patients that it was effective, they were then placed in a randomized double-blinded outpatient study and then brought back after 6 weeks to determine whether or not there was an improvement in 6-minute walk. So here are the results. This is the open label 24-hour infusion. On the left, CVP is central venous pressure. On the right, CWP is pulmonary venous pressure. Their baseline values are shown in blue and their 24-hour values in red. And you can see that the central venous pressure and pulmonary venous pressures went down at rest with their legs up in the pedals and riding the bike. And if you want to know what this magnitude of treatment effect is, I would have to characterize it as dramatic, and no other drug has ever achieved this in medical history to this date. However, you cannot get a drug approved based on hemodynamics. You have to get it approved on some types of functional activity. And so after the 6 weeks, when the patients came back and we did a 6-minute walk, we showed an improvement in that 6-minute walk, and the patients randomized to receive active drug in red, whereas the ones who got placebo had a worsening. This is the first medicine that has ever improved 6-minute walk in any population with this type of heart failure. So at the present time, we now have the rights to an oral formulation for levosimendan from Orion, which is the company that licensed up the drug. We approached the FDA and have now agreement that we can use the oral formulation for a single phase 3 trial for approval. We don't have to do an interim study. We are currently transitioning the existing patients to that oral formulation so that we can determine the best and most effective dose. And then we plan to start our phase 3 trial in the first half of 2022. So in summary, pulmonary hypertension, left heart failure has an extremely high unmet medical need without any approved therapies. It has a very large commercial market. Our drug has a unique mechanism of action that directly targets the problem. We have the very first positive phase 2 trial on hemodynamics and clinical data, and an agreement to conduct a single phase 3 trial for approval. So with this, I'm going to turn this back to Chris, and he will go through with you quickly the timelines for our development.
Chris, I can't tell. Oh, Chris, you know what? It's the old mute trick. There he is. Oh
gosh.
Thanks, DJ. So on Imatinib, we've basically got formulation work now complete. We're going to do a simple 12-subject PK study under our IND, and we'll have results of that this year. We'll then initiate phase 3 in the first half of 22. So all of the planning, partner selection, protocol refinement that we need for that phase 3 start in the second quarter is ongoing in parallel with a very rapid, simple PK test. The next slide shows that for levosimendan, where, as Stuart described it, we've transitioned all those patients from the IV original formulation to the daily oral. We are steps away from the final patient in the open label extension, going through that transition and settling on his or her dose. And that allows us, again, in close to the middle of next year to initiate enrollment in that phase 3. So as we mentioned at the start, it's been a year of transformation and new focus, and there's a lot coming up in the next 8 or 9 months for us as we launch those 2 pivotal studies. So with that, we'll hand it back, Brent. Questions from the audience?
Yeah, sure. Always questions from the audience. Our audience is always hungry for some good old questions. And I see we just added another guest here, Michael. How's it going, Michael?
Very good, thank you.
Cool. So Michael's stopping by for a couple questions. So let's see. I have a couple questions related to Imatinib, and then also for the Group 2 candidate. So you said that when you got the candidate from, I forget which other company it was, you added a coating to remove the potential nausea and vomiting, correct? Was there anything else changed about the formulation?
Yes, we changed the dose as well. So it's a novel proprietary dose on top of it. And that will assure us that we will have no concerns regarding generic intrusion of this drug when it's on the orphan market.
Great. Okay, gotcha. And then switching over to the Group 2 pulmonary hypertension, what's the total addressable market like for that?
It's hard to say because there's been very few prevalence studies. I think it's a fair estimate to say 1.5 million. It could be as high as 5 million.
Okay, awesome. And then Stuart, you had an interesting comment there, but if Michael wants to take one over, he can. That's cool. You said that for Group 2, I believe you said, the FDA has sort of a less stringent process, right? Why is that?
Because the FDA has a legacy standard that for pulmonary hypertension indications, they will only ask for a single phase 3 trial especially when it's an unmet need and there's nothing else in the market. Knowing that advantage in our favor is why we went that route.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. And we just had a question here. I don't personally understand it, but maybe one of you guys do. So we have Proton in the chat asking, in testing with oxygenating therapies beforehand or during that 6-minute test, does that make sense to any of you?
Oxygen is only administered if the patient needs it, but we don't administer oxygen as a test. If the question is, are we challenging with oxygen to see the response? The answer is no.
Gotcha. Okay. I hope that answered your question there, Proton. That was kind of it from the questions. Really awesome presentation, guys. Thanks for participating today. Tenax Therapeutics, it's ticker TENX. Thanks a bunch for joining, gentlemen. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, Brad.
Thank you.